I'm gonna share my screen immediately. Hello, everybody. If you are joining us on Next Level Keeping, we're gonna wait a few minutes before we get things started, just to make sure that people are here and excited and ready to learn about keeping at the next level. I have to have both of my computers open to be successful in this project. How are my panelists doing today?
Great.
Doing good, doing good.
Good.
Fantastic. Excited to be here.
I'm so happy to hear that. If you're watching and want to say hello in the chat, please feel free. I like knowing when people are here and that they're excited about it, so say hi. Love that. Okay, cool. Fantastic. We're gonna probably get started around 10. Well, for me, it's 10:30, but for everyone else, it's different, but like 10:33-ish. We got some people from all over the country. That's exciting. Okay. And right, we'll give it another minute or so. If you've joined us in the last minute from the last time I asked, feel free to say hi in the chat. Let us know you're here. Let us know you're excited. We'll be starting in about like a minute or two. Just want to make sure everyone has time to get in here for Next Level Keeping. It was funny that I was asked to moderate this panel of all things because there's a joke in the West about me being Keeper Lindsay, which is always a very bad time. I'm very bad at it. I was only forced to do it at a tournament once where we had very few actual keepers. And so we made the switch of me and one of our other female chasers playing keeper. So that way our like bigger guy could be a point defender, because I was not going to be a point defender either. And everyone thinks it's funny, and then I'm good. I'm not. It was so bad. There's one photo of me stricken with fear in my face as someone was about to go score on me. It was very, very sad. But okay, it's 10:33. If you're joining us now, we're gonna slowly get things started. Welcome to Next Level Keeping. My name is Lindsay. I'm your moderator for this event. We have 4 panelists here today. We're gonna introduce themselves soon. Just so you know, I keep a slideshow up for the entirety of the panel, and it reminds me of college, how like you'd present something and then the slide would just say exactly what you're saying out loud, and that's what this is. But I do that on purpose. That way, if my panelists need to refer back to a question, it's right in front of them. And also, if you're someone who's just joining us now, you are caught up with what we're talking about, and you're not just hearing an answer to a question that you don't know what they're talking about. So just so you know, I know what this slideshow looks like. So we are going to get started, and our panelists can introduce themselves. You can just go in like photo order. So John, you can start.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm John Jackson. I played for a variety of teams. Started at Harvard, then played for Rochester United and Whiteout and Hailstorm. And now I play for the Warriors and the Titans.
Awesome. Robbie, you can go.
Hey guys, I'm Robbie Sluss. I'm a 2-time USQ national runner-up at Texas State and Texas Hill Country Heat, MLQ champion with the Austin Outlaws, and a USNT gold medalist at the 2019 Pan American Games. I'm still on the standing roster with them. And I was recently featured on the podcast The Beat with Emily Hickmont and Ian Skura about keeping.
Awesome. All right, go ahead, Kristen.
Hey guys, I'm Kristen. I started playing at Rutgers at the college level, even back when we were technically unaffiliated, but that's a different topic. But we started Rutgers, moved on to New York City Nocturnes, where I really started keeping more so. And then now I am a co-manager for a newly formed New York, New Jersey team called Skyline Quidditch. So that's where we're at. We're super excited for that.
Awesome. All right, Quincy.
Hello, everybody. I am the current coach, player, captain for Terminus Quidditch Atlanta. Started playing with Tribe Quidditch in Arkansas. Did 1 year with Florida's Finest. Founded the team of Atlanta in 2017. Was on the national team for 2018 as a chaser.
Awesome. Fantastic. All right, we are going to hop right into this. If you're watching, you can feel free to send questions or whatever into the chat. If it comes up naturally, we'll answer it before the Q&A, but don't expect that, I guess. But yeah, feel free to talk amongst yourselves in the chat. It's fun to read along. But anyway, we're going to hop right into this with our first quick question is, what's the biggest difference in your gameplay mindset as a keeper and a chaser? Quincy, let's start with you for this one, as I think you have the most experience playing both of these positions.
The mindset between keeper and chaser is, I see keeper as more of like a field general, controlling the pace and speed of the game, as compared to chaser, which is more just playing defense and scoring. But as keeper, I'm able to control offense and control defense and direct players in positions and where I would like them to go. And I'll say for me, that's my biggest mindset for a keeper versus a chaser.
Awesome. Thanks. Kristen, is there anything you want to add to this one?
Yeah, I guess the only other point to kind of go off what he said is kind of for like from the chasing position, because I did start off as chaser, is kind of like knowing what your keeper is going to be doing and sort of looking for like open lanes and just sort of like understanding how your keeper works and like doing the best with that, like what you can do.
Awesome. John, is there anything to contribute, especially because you've played on so many different teams at this point, like maybe how a different team may use one of these positions differently than another?
Yeah, so actually, I kind of think that the differences between keeper and chaser are often over-exaggerated. I feel that every quaffle player on the team should be comfortable playing every position, because whether it's in your game plan or not, there are often just situations that you get into where as a keeper, you have to leave the hoops and make a stop or contain someone, or maybe as a chaser, your keeper gets a yellow card or something and you have to cover the hoops for a little while. So I think it's really important to be able to play both positions, no matter who you are on the field. But I think for the person that's currently covering the hoops, yeah, as Quincy and Kristen said, like communication is a big thing, being the field general, and just like you have the best vision of the field. And so the important thing is to be talking as a keeper and be aware of where everyone is and what everyone's doing.
Awesome. Robbie, I know they've already mentioned a lot, but is there anything that you want to add from your own experience?
Yeah, just real quick, just touching on what John and Quincy had highlighted there at the beginning there, with being the field general, I think it's more of for a keeper is you're putting your teammates in the best position to succeed and be successful at whatever their job is going to be, whether they're a point defender or if you need them to be by the hoops and to score. It's just making sure that, you know, they're going to shine themselves versus you're kind of just behind the scenes almost, just making everything flow smoothly.
Awesome. Fantastic. All right, move on to the next question. What are the fundamental skills that you think a person should work on? That says fist, but I meant to write first, if they want to be a keeper. John, if you want to start with this one, what fundamental skills do you think are the most important?
Yeah, well, as we all sort of alluded to in the last question, I think communication is really a big one. I think people don't really think of that as a fundamental skill, but it really is, especially for Quidditch, to be able to recognize what's going on the field. So develop your field vision and be aware of both chasers and beaters on the other team, and then communicate what you see and what you need people to do on your own team. And I think that's honestly more important than actually blocking shots as a keeper. I think like directing your defense is really the most important thing.
Awesome. Quincy, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, going off of John, I think the field vision is highly important to understand the game, but also know what the defense is doing, what the offense is doing, and knowing your players and the players on the opposing team as well. I think that's very important for something to work on as like a first step.
Awesome. And Kristen, you had kind of a unique experience of your like transition from primarily chaser into keeper. Is there anything specific that like you had to develop as your skill in that transition?
Yeah, no, definitely. It was definitely a change in pace for sure, but it was for the better, honestly, because I went from being chaser to keeper, and playing keeper brought me back to playing basketball, which I did all my life. And I feel like if people can, if they've played other sports or stuff, they could take things that they know from those sports and kind of apply it and kind of like learn and kind of build off things that you already have. So like John and Quincy were saying with like field vision and kind of being able to read the field, that was something that just instantly clicked for me when I became keeper, and just having sort of like everything in front of me and seeing what was going on just felt very familiar. So I feel like if like transitioning to keeper, if you can kind of know what your strengths are and what you are good at going into it, that's like a good base to start, because it can be like definitely intimidating at first when you like transition into that role. So that's definitely something that could be good, is like knowing what you're good at and then recognizing things that you could like do better in the process.
Awesome. And then Robbie, again, I know we've covered a lot, but is there anything specific, especially as you had to develop into like a national player as opposed to just playing for your city, that you had to really work on to bring your keeping up?
I think, my other panelists have covered it perfectly. Communication, your field vision, and knowing what you do best. If you can, master those skills, you're going to be great. I mean, that's what separates any keeper apart, are those traits right there.
Awesome. Okay, and for this one, we're going to go right back to Robbie, just to mix it up. But how do you set up defensively to assure that your hoops are always protected, through just yourself or with other teammates or et cetera? And does that change based on the offense that you're playing against? If there's like a specific person on the field that you have to adjust for?
So there's a lot of information there, so I'll get through pretty quickly. Leave my co-panelists definitely some things to say. For me personally, I like to run a man defense. I know that's not typically what most teams run. It's just what I'm comfortable with, and the people, like you said, my teammates, I trust all of them to guard it. If it gets a little overwhelmed, we can switch to a 2-2. But my plan does change based on what my opponent's doing. If I notice they're being, super aggressive, I want to drop back to a 2-2 quickly. That way we have more protection at the hoops. And if I need to rotate people, I can do it a lot more quickly. I've got a better vision on everyone because everyone's accounted for. Versus if they're playing slowly, if I'm playing man, we can be a lot more aggressive and try to force passes that, their team doesn't want to necessarily make, and create a little bit of chaos there. And kind of covered a little bit, but specific players on your team, I think as a keeper, you need to know what your players do well and what they may struggle a little bit with, and put them in the best position to succeed there.
Awesome. Quincy, what about you? How do you like adjust for different offenses and stuff?
It depends on the team and how they're playing. Me personally, I usually try to study the film of the teams before the match. And I play a big part role with the person that's on the hoops with me. I use them to help cover my weakness while also baiting the team to make certain decisions that I know I can take advantage of using what I know I'm good at. So it varies based off of that and the personnel that I have on the field.
Awesome. Kristen, is there anything you want to add that hasn't been said?
Yeah, I guess just one more thing that's kind of like definitely something that I've experienced, which hasn't been mentioned, is a lot of keepers are generally very strong or tall or both, but sometimes you also have keepers who maybe aren't, and I think it's just also similar to, like I said before, like kind of knowing what you're working with. And it doesn't always have to be like, I thought going into keeping, like I have to tackle somebody like full body as much as my very tall keeper. There's a keeper on Nocturne's, Quinn, who's just a very tall, strong guy, can take it down, no problem. Whereas I will just be like a leaf in the wind whenever like I'm trying to stop somebody. So I think it's just knowing what you have and maybe just changing your game, and still just, you can't block everybody or stop everybody, but just making that route like as hard as possible, and just kind of like creating just issues for them and making it as difficult as you can for them to score, or like just stopping options basically.
Awesome. John, we've talked about a lot, but is there anything else you want to bring up from your own experience?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to quickly shout out the Fast Break News article by Eric Berglund came out a few weeks ago, because I think that really answers this question very well. And the article sort of described keeping defensively as a mixture of hockey, handball, and soccer. And I think that like learning positioning from those sports like really translates well to Quidditch. And then just to answer this sort of last part, Yeah, I think absolutely my game plan changes based on what the other team is doing. Whether ideally I'll have scouted them ahead of time and have an idea going into the game, but a lot of times that sort of adjustment has to happen on the fly. And yeah, so yeah, definitely changing things up. And then one last thing is that it's very rare that you'll be able to actually have all options covered at the same time. And so I think the important thing to do is making sure that the option that isn't covered, or the one that's covered the least well, is the lowest percentage option. So whether that's a shot, like a mid-range shot, or a tough pass or something like that.
Awesome, fantastic. Okay, how did you get better at reading what an offense is into? Quincy, let's go back to you because you talked about film already. So if you want to discuss more about how you have gotten to the place where you are now to be able to read a field while you're on defense.
I typically tend to, so like if I'm watching film, I'm watching players, I like to try to see what they do, certain things that they like to do, and I pick up on that. So that way I can kind of predict their next movement or things they might do. Yeah, it's just studying people. I constantly study people and just watch them a lot. And that's typically how I got to where I've gotten to, is just watching and learning from other people.
Awesome. John, let's go back to you just to keep mixing up this order. Like what steps have you taken for yourself to get better at being able to read an offense?
Yeah, absolutely. This just comes with practice and time. But that being said, I think it's very important to read the eyes of the person that you're that has the ball, which doesn't necessarily mean guard the hoop that they're looking at, because a lot of people sort of look with their eyes intentionally to look you off of what they actually want to do. But I think with practice, it becomes a lot easier to judge whether someone is looking at something that they actually want to do or intentionally looking you off. Yeah, so I think reading that person that has the ball, and then just getting practice with different like formations and rotations that offensives can do is really the best way to do that. It doesn't come naturally, so it takes time.
So, Robbie, is there anything else you want to contribute to this one?
Yeah, I think that they've covered it very well. Just practicing playing, of course, are foremost the best options to sort of just get used to what different teams' offenses run. I think another way is watching film. Going back to what Quincy said, studying what players are doing. Film is a great part. I know not everyone has access to it, but if you are able to get your hands on film or have someone record you when you're playing, if you can see if you make a mistake, I think those are the best things to see, because you kind of get in the mindset, okay, why did I think this way? What did I see? And how can I correct that so I know what to do in the future?
And Kristen, I think you have the least amount of years under your belt as a keeper. Is there anything that like you're still proactively trying to get better at, or something that it's like planning to work on in the next season to help you adjust with this a little better?
Yeah, one thing that I find super helpful is actually understanding the other positions better, since keeper is kind of like a central position. Understanding what chasers and what beaters are trying to do, and kind of understanding their game more. If you know what like their mindset is and what their plan is, that's definitely going to help you to like be better with what you're up against and what you're working with. And then the other only point that I want to add, because obviously, as these guys have mentioned, like film is super, super helpful and important. And whenever you're at like regionals or nationals, watching other teams or watching, being in that venue of having all these amazing players around you and watching that is super helpful. But I think the only other thing to add is that like watching it with somebody who maybe can explain things that you don't know or you don't know, so like somebody more knowledgeable to like watch with and kind of just bounce ideas off of is like the best way to make the most out of like that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Fantastic. All right, we'll move on. Offensively, how do you build confidence as a ball carrier? Let's circle back to Kristen for this one. Again, mixing up the order. Did you work with your team? Did you watch more film? Like, what types of steps did you take? Because I have no confidence as a ball carrier at all. I think I'm absolutely incapable of it. And I did not realize how hard it was until I was forced to do it. And I was like, this is a terrible idea. So what steps have you taken to kind of build that confidence up for yourself?
Well, definitely accepting the fact that you can be terrified basically like half the time, if not all the time. I think that's just a given. And just like film, I think is the answer to like everything for sure. But besides that, it's back to like reading and understanding defense and kind of what you're up against, how the defense is playing, what they're giving to you. And then really the best part is knowing your teammates really well, and you should be able to kind of be able to predict like what your teammates are going to do, what you're working with. You know, like this person's going to move a certain way, they're going to make this cut. And I feel like the more that you know about your teammates, or you know, like being on the same page as your beaters, or just having that understanding, like that unity, is definitely the most effective. But also just pointing out that, like, you know, keepers generally are ball carriers, but don't necessarily have to be. So I know when I used to keep, if Tyler Walker was on the field, I'm going to throw that ball to him so fast because I'm like, go do something with this and be amazing. So it's not necessarily always on you if, you know, there is like somebody else, or like you have options. It's not always on your back 100% of the time.
Awesome. And then John, you're the photo here. How did you build confidence as a ball carrier?
Yeah, I just want to second that last thing that Kristen said, that I want to fight against the myth that the keeper has to be the ball carrier. I think teams, especially newer teams, like really buy into that, and that doesn't have to be the case. It's very easy for a keeper to play at the hoops defensively and then shift to a wing position offensively in a sort of like set half field offense. The one thing though that the keeper often does have to do is carry the ball on fast breaks. And so I think confidence there is really important. But regardless, for a ball carrier, I think as we talked about before, in a different way, field vision is really important. Knowing where your teammates are, knowing where your open options are at all times. So if something surprises you, you know, like where your outs are. And also recognizing that the point defender right in front of you can't see what's behind them usually. So you have that advantage over them. And so recognizing that and knowing that they have to account for anything that could be going on behind them is a good way to sort of like reinforce that confidence and power that you have with the ball, that you know what's going on and the defense doesn't always know what's going on.
Awesome. Robbie, what about you? Again, especially in that transition from going from college to club to MLQ and then on a national team, like did your confidence waver along any of those points, or did you kind of just knew your skills and knew what you could do and roll with it?
That's a good question. I think for me personally, it was a lot of just sort of self-confidence off the start. I got a great coach at Texas State, Jackson Johnson, just kind of, you know, let me be me. And he was like, hey, you're going to make mistakes starting out. Just make sure you make more good plays than bad ones. I kind of think practice was the best part to learn, because if you learn, hey, I'm going to make a mistake here or there, when you see it in a game scenario, you're much less likely to repeat the same thing you do at practice as far as mistake wise. And it's just get used to having the ball in your hands. I think that's the biggest thing. If you're able to carry it confidently, get used to making your passes, you know, when you're in a game, I don't think you focus on it as much. It's kind of like the speed of the game goes so quickly, especially as John was saying on fast breaks. You can't really stop and think, okay, what do I do? It's more of a reaction just because you've gone through it so much.
Awesome. And then Quincy, next to you, but also I'm curious with your experiences playing at such a high level chaser as well. Is there a difference between ball carrying as a chaser and a keeper? Does your confidence waver depending on like what headband you're wearing? That side of it.
No, it doesn't change. The only difference with the keeper and chaser is that with the keeper, I can get the ball quicker for fast breaks. That's probably the big major difference. But yeah, I would say kind of back to what they're saying is practice. That's something that I try to push for all my players to do, for anyone, is to ball handle during practice. I don't care if you mess up, it's okay. But like you have to mess up and understand that it's okay to mess up and you're going to mess up, but just keep doing it to the point to where it becomes natural, because as Robbie was saying, it's like you don't have time to think. So it needs to just be a natural reaction to certain situations and going through the game.
Awesome. Fantastic. Okay, so keepers, obviously, like we've talked about this whole time, are a big part of communicating on the field. We kind of talked about this already when it talked about like studying things for defense, but how do you train yourself to read the field? And what do you think the most effective keepers do in the sport that kind of set them apart as being like the best? Robbie, let's start with you with this one.
For me, to train myself to read the field, just sort of what we've been talking about the whole time: practice, gameplay, and film study. I think if you can just review as much as you can, you start seeing patterns, you start seeing repetition, and it starts making a lot more sense to you. And I think what keepers really do while communicating that sets them apart is they're confident. And they don't stop talking. There's a lot of teams that you'll see sort of their moment when they get down, you can just sort of feel an energy drop, or people aren't as, into the game at that point. You've got to stay on top of it. You've got to be confident. You've got to keep your team motivated and energized. And people who go on to that next level, you can see there's just something about them that the team will rally around them. And it's very contagious.
Awesome. John, do you have anything to add to that one?
Yeah, a couple things. I guess one that we sort of touched on, but haven't really focused on, is that along with communicating comes decision making, and I think that being decisive is a really important part of this. So as keeper with like vision of the whole field, you're the one that is often calling the shots and any changes to make or switches to make on defense. And I think it's important to make those decisions quickly and decisively, even if they're the wrong decisions. A lot of times a quick bad decision is better than a slow good decision. And then also another thing I think that a trap that especially newer keepers often fall into is just watching the quaffle game. I think that the best keepers are talking to their beaters and being aware of the beaters on the other team as well, because it's really, it's all connected, obviously, and it's really important to know that the other team is getting ready to attack with their beaters, and like when they have openings against your beaters. And so being aware of what's happening in the beater game, I think, is just as important as being aware of what's happening, like what cuts are happening in the quaffle game.
Awesome. Quincy, is there anything that you've done specifically different in regard to how you have trained yourself?
So I guess sometimes it gets a little tedious in practice, but like sometimes we'll run this same thing over and over and kind of talk it out with the team and see what we could have done different for everyone to better prepare for the situation. And in terms that kind of helps you be able to read the field better, but see different decisions and options that you can make during a game. And back to what everybody else is saying, communication is key. Not, like I said, not talking just to chasers, but beaters as well, because it all ties together into one. And when you're talking and communicating, it makes the game just that much easier.
Awesome. And then, Kristen, I know we've covered a lot here already, but is there anything you want to contribute, either what you've seen from other people or what you've done yourself?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like, kind of continue on with what John was saying. And basically the only other thing I wanted to add was that, as keeper, you're sort of you see everything that's going on, whereas there's people involved in like beater battles, they're being tackled, they're kind of like doing their own thing, and like you're the only one that can really see everything. So it's definitely on your back to, communicate that. Like if your beater's running to go get a bludger somewhere, they're running that way, they don't know what's going on behind them. So I feel like it's definitely on, your shoulders to be the person that you should be, I think, talking probably more so than anybody, because you can tell people what's going on and you can give them kind of like be like their blind spot, like telling them what's going on in like areas they can't see or things that they don't see or stuff like that. So I think there's like no wrong amount of communication. Like you should just be consistently talking like the whole time.
Awesome. Fantastic. Okay, so what advice would you give players that are new to keeping? In the interest in time, I'm going to ask two of my panelists this question, and then the next question is kind of similar. It was like an advice, so we're going to ask the other two then. So for this one, Kristen and John, I'd like to hear from you of what advice you'd give for people that are new. Kristen, if you want to start.
Yeah, I think, like I said before, it's very intimidating to go into it at first, especially from like a female gender nonconformity position where there is this expectation, and like obviously there is that size difference or like strength difference and like just sort of like confidence. And I think just one thing that like I learned is like you're gonna make mistakes, and like just because you get scored on doesn't mean that it's like your fault. Like just because you're the last stop on their drive. You know, it could have been like, you know, a missed beat, it could have been a missed tackle. It's not just because they scored on you doesn't mean that that was like your fault or something you necessarily could have stopped, which is kind of hard to take at first because that can definitely be a confidence killer, especially when you're first starting out is getting scored on. But like I said, I would just say like knowing your strengths, like just trying to stay confident and learn from it, watching other people, getting advice, and just really trying to make the most of it. And just reminding yourself, like there's always going to be someone that's like a little bit stronger, a little bit faster, more experienced, but that doesn't take away from like, you know, what you might be able to contribute.
Awesome. All right, John, any advice from you?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what Kristen was saying about playing to your strengths. There are a lot of different types of keepers and a lot of different types of keepers that can be successful. So yeah, I think the important thing is to experiment and practice and figure out what works best for you. And then this isn't quite an answer to this question, but for coaches, give your keepers and all of your players time to experiment and time to see what works and what doesn't, and don't just pull them at the first mistake.
Awesome, fantastic. And then kind of on the other end of the spectrum is, what is the biggest thing that a person who's already keeping can take their game to their next level? So Quincy and Robbie, I'll have you answer this one. So Quincy, if you want to start.
To take it to the next level, I would think a person can look at ways that they can grow. The game is constantly changing and adapting. Like I know 2-arm tackles is becoming a thing now, so that will alter how some people play. But just trying to stay ahead of the curve and just constantly learning and thinking how can you stay a step above everybody else. But that's, yeah, for that one, that's about all I have for that.
Sounds good. And then Robbie, what about you?
Love what Quincy said. That's really good. You know, stay on top of all the changes that are happening. I think you need to be probably one of the most informed people on the field as the keeper. But also, I think, you know, as I've highlighted a lot, either watching film or talking to more experienced players, I think, you know, as an athlete, that you're going to hit a limit to where you can get to. So I think the more diverse you are on the mental side of the game can really step you up to the next level. I mean, look at the guys who've been doing this for a long time: Tyler Trudeau, Jake Archibald, of course, Augie Monroe. Of course, their physical traits are all there, but the mental side of the game that they have experience in, I think, is really what separates those guys.
Awesome, fantastic. And then our last official question is, keepers have been dominated by male players since the sport has existed. What can you say to women and non-binary players who are interested to try to step up and start ball carrying and start playing on hoops and et cetera? Kristen, I think we're going to obviously start with you here with the actual experience in doing this.
Yeah, no, definitely. If I get too ranty, please let me know, because I absolutely would love to. But honestly, like there's obviously a lot of gender inequality throughout the entire sport, especially in this position. And I think the hardest part that I had to learn was not even dealing with the like blatant sexism, to be quite honest. It's the kind of like underlying where, you know, you might not necessarily be knowingly or like intentionally, you know, treating somebody differently, but if your play is changing because that keeper is, you know, female or a non-binary, like that's an issue. Like personally, from like a fantasy tournament, I saw, like, I was playing a keeper and I noticed that like a certain individual on my team would stay super close or would like be like, oh, you know, I have you in ways that if it was the male keeper, they would kind of like go off over there. They just clearly had more trust, and like it literally felt like they were just kind of waiting for me to mess up. And then like another fantasy tournament, I didn't get played for keeper, and then someone literally told the captain of my team, like, you know, you should probably do that. And then when I did, they were like, wow, like you actually, like they said, they're like, wow, you actually like know how to do this. Like that's pretty crazy. So it's not always like that, and that's not to say they intentionally did that, but I think it's just like acknowledging that like you need to, you know, see those players like as equal to you, like regardless. Like it's just about, you know, skill and this and that, especially with fantasy tournaments, because I feel like that is the chance for people to learn things and to try the scary things and have it not matter. I feel like fantasy tournaments should be the place where people are like encouraged to play that. And just the last thing that I want to say, just to kind of bring, I guess, a positive solution to that, is just being like supportive. Like after that fantasy tournament where I had that with those individuals, I went off to Tyler Walker for like an hour straight, and he just like listened, validated it, was like, that's absolutely what happens. Like, you just need to keep your confidence. You need to just not let it get to you and just prove that like what you're doing. And he said, like, don't be afraid to tell them, like, I know what I'm doing. Like, you can speak up and, kind of validate yourself and, just really defend that what to do and you can do it just as well as them.
Fantastic. I do want to keep, I want to hear from all of you on this question, but just I want to also leave time for a Q&A, so just be a little concise with your answers, panelist. But Quincy, for your next, but also on top of this question of like uplifting female and non-binary players to play as men in the sport, is there anything that you can recommend to coaches or other ball carriers or whatever who have a female on their team, and how to support them specifically also would be helpful from the other three of you?
Believe and trust in your players. In my opinion, that person shouldn't be if the person's on a roster, then you trust them to play. So trust them to play and give them encouragement and let them get out there and see what they can do. You never know until they get out there and perform. And if they mess up, you don't have to instantly pull them. Give them time and just, again, trust. Trust is huge. If you build confidence and trust, people can go a long way, no matter who you are, what position, trust in the players.
Awesome. Fantastic. All right, Robbie, you can go next.
I think Kristen and Quincy hit it right on the head there. It's all about trust. I think Quincy said it perfectly. If you trust them to be on your roster, you should trust them to carry the ball. I mean, this game is literally, you trust everyone that you're on the field with to make a play at any time. So there shouldn't be an issue, and Kristen, I'm sorry you had that experience there. I'm sure multiple people have as well, but just know that, you're out there to do your jobs. Don't be afraid to speak up and let people know, hey, I know what I'm doing. There's a reason I'm out here.
Awesome. And then John, if you have any more final thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, just to add to what everyone else said, this starts in practice. I think it's really important to give everyone on your team chances to play every position if they want to, but it has to start in practice, because too often I think I see people just in a game where they're getting blown out or they're blowing out the other team. They're like, hey, let's throw this person in at keeper and see what happens. And then that person is unprepared and they don't do well, and then they never get to play keeper again. And so that has to happen in practice first, so that people are prepared and confident once they get in the game.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you. And then also, just to shamelessly plug, there is a panel later today at 3:30 my time, so 6:30 Eastern time, on more than just the body on the field and like sexism and transphobia in Quidditch. So if you're interested in this topic, we're going to talk more about it then. So that is all of our formal questions. We are going to jump to Q&A now, and we have a few questions already. So let's start with the one that I saw. Where do you look first when you're coming up on offense, when setting up? Like, what things are you prioritizing on the field when you are coming up on offense? Robbie, if you want to start with this one.
Probably the first and foremost thing I look for is who's got bludger control. I think it's very important to know whether we've got the advantage or we're at a disadvantage, because from there I can make a decision. Okay, we're going to play a little slower and give my beaters a chance to try to make a play, create a little chaos, try to get our control back and move the ball around. I think that's probably the most important thing you're looking for, because if you go straight in there, don't know that, you're going to turn the ball over pretty quickly, more than likely. Other things I look for is what kind of zone. Are they in a 2-2 zone? Are they playing man? What kind of defense are they in, and how are we going to be able to penetrate that?
Awesome. I'm good for all of our Q&A questions. I'm going to call on two of you, just so you know now. So John, if you want to answer this one as well when you're coming up on offense.
Yeah, I agree with Robbie. I think first I look to the beaters on the other team, see what they're doing. And at that point, I should know what my beaters are going to do. And if I don't, I talk to them on the way up the field. And then once I know what the other team's beaters are doing, I look at their chasers. I see who on our team is uncovered. I know that that's my option to throw the ball to in an emergency, or to set up a give and go or something like that. And then from there, you do what you had practiced all along, and you set up your offense accordingly.
Awesome. Okay. Next question is, how do you improve your ability to drive on the hoops, dunking, finishing while taking contact, especially when there's multiple chasers in your way? This is just like assuming that the drive is still the best option. How do you improve your chances of succeeding there? Quincy, we'll go to you for this one.
So typically it kind of goes back to the reading the team beater, especially if I have the ball and I'm about to drive. I'm reading their beater, but communicating with my beater. So the moment he throws, I'm already looking at a projected path of where I can get through the opposing team. So I'm already reading their feet before we even start. So I know that I need to cut left, cut right, and get through. Other than that, it's just you have to want it more than the other person because you are getting hit. So you just have to really want it more than the other person.
Awesome. And then Kristen, for you, I know you have a much different experience trying to accomplish these tasks than the other three panelists. Was there anything that you have done to try to adapt your driving skills as keeper?
Yeah, besides like the desperate like motivational talk going on in my head like while I'm driving, I definitely have found that using fakes is extremely helpful because I do know that if most people get like a hand on me, then I don't usually win the physical battle. So it's more so being quicker or moving in a way where they can't even get to that point. So I found that fakes are extremely, extremely helpful, especially since a lot of keepers do have the mindset of blocking shots and going for that kind of a thing. So if you fake it, like you're going to go for a shot, you're kind of throwing them off of their balance and, you can kind of sort of like those quick side moves and just kind of working with what you have and doing the best and kind of using their weaknesses if you can, like against them basically.
Awesome. Fantastic. On defense, how do you keep track of an unmarked chaser? Robbie, if you want to start there.
For an unmarked chaser, I typically just listen to my teammates. This is where sort of people on the sidelines come into play as well. Our team is really good on communication and kind of know like, hey, they're always telling me, okay, person on small hoop, person on back hoop, person behind you. They're always engaged. And this is where even if you're not in the game, you're still in the game. Your team is still playing. So it's kind of your role on the sidelines. Let your keeper know what's going on. That way he can communicate, or whoever is playing keeper at that point. Caught myself there. Sorry about that. For whoever is playing keeper at that point can always know what's going on.
Awesome. And then Quincy, for you, is there anything specific that you do to keep track of the unmarked chaser coming up on offense?
Typically I played a little bit different. So usually I'm watching an unmarked player. At times I rely on my speed. So I know if that ball does get lobbed behind me, I can usually run up under it and get there fast enough. So it varies. I might tell the person on the hoop next to me to cheat over or go a certain way, but it just depends on the situation.
Awesome. And then this question, I think I know what they're asking, so I'm going to try anyway. And if I'm wrong, please correct me. But do you prioritize your alignment coming up on offense with the other chasers or the other beaters? Kristen, if you want to start here.
I'm not completely sure how to answer that. I would just say that mostly, like, I guess it's just similar to, like I said before, like kind of knowing your teammates, understanding your beaters, just having like that understanding. That's really the most I can give with that. Is for me personally, is just like knowing how my teammates play and kind of what their habits are, what their tendencies are, and then kind of like just making the most out of that.
Awesome. And John, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's very situational. I think it really depends on the game plan and what the other team's game plan is about what sort of decisions you're making there.
Awesome. And we have a question. As keepers who are used to ball carrying, have you done anything to improve your off-ball play? So when you're playing in a passing offense, you can be cohesive with your teammates. We'll go to Robbie and John for this one because I think you two are the more primary keeper, don't really play a chaser as often. So what have you done to be a better off-ball player? Robbie, if you want to start.
Sure. Yeah, you definitely covered that. I tried chaser one time. We switched that very quickly. As great of a keeper as I am, I cannot play chaser for whatever reason. But what I found to be helpful is when I'm off the ball is just getting used to the rotation. I think my first week at the USNT camp when we were in Virginia playing with Harry and Rachel and Jacob, they're pretty much they carry the ball a lot too. So I had to really get used to being able to rotate and just move around the opposition and sort of create myself in the backside of the hoop, which I found was actually a lot of fun. As tall as I am, I can just kind of run up and jump up and get the ball. So It was actually a lot of fun, but so I'm definitely down to do that more. But it's definitely, it was a weird feeling for me for sure.
Awesome. All right, John, anything that you have done?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like I said before, it's really important for everyone on the field to be comfortable at different positions. And so one thing that I like to do a lot are give and goes. And I think that that really is about finding where the open space is, and getting your body there and getting the ball there. And that's true for sort of anyone playing off the ball, is recognizing where the open spaces, where the free cuts to the hoop are, who the other team is marking, and who's marking who, if there's a height mismatch or a speed mismatch, and stuff like that.
Okay, awesome. We're gonna take we have about 5 minutes left, so we're gonna take like 2 more questions, but I am going to put the rest of the questions into the event Slack channel, so we can have the panelists and anyone else who wants to contribute answer there, because we will not be able to get through all of these, which is great because we have a lot of people who are really engaged. But what are some specific telltale signs that someone is trying to fake you or mislead you away from their actual objective? Quincy, let's start with you.
Oh, that's tough. It depends on the person on reading their eyes. Most people, I read their eyes, but I can't throw in one tidbit. Tony is one of the worst people to read eyes because he's great at faking passes. It's annoying, but typically I read eyes or kind of see how players like to move and go. But yeah, typically I'm just reading their eyes and movements.
Awesome. I'm just going to go to the next questions. We can get some more in. But where do you position yourself initially on defense, or what factors do you put into your defense positioning before an offense starts? Kristen, if you want to take this one, like how do you kind of decide where you're going to position yourself, and what like factors go into that?
Yeah, no, I definitely start off, I guess, just kind of like in the general middle till I figure out kind of what they're doing, which way they're leaning, where like the unguarded chaser is, where they're being. You basically really have to, like, I think that's very situational, and you just kind of have to adapt the whole. It's all about like just adapting to what they're doing and just sort of being able to break that down and read it, and also just kind of knowing who you're up against. Really, just like a chaser that maybe shoots more versus drives more, so you kind of know where you have to be relative to them. It's really, I think, just breaking down sort of each component of the field in that moment and like being where you have to be in that moment.
Awesome. And then do you prefer, this is going to go to Robbie, sure. Do you prefer set plays, formations, or freelance when going into an offense? Is there any of those options that you like would never do or you prefer to do? So yeah.
I think the preferred ideal would be a set play because everyone's on the same page there. And that means that it's working. But realistically, I don't think that necessarily ever happens. I think the game's always free flowing for the most part, and you're reacting accordingly based on what the defense is doing. It's kind of like a little dance that you and the other team are performing. They'll shift one way, so you're shifting the other. Your players are moving, they're doing something, you're doing something else. So it's kind of always free flowing. It's not necessarily everything's always going to work how you wish it would.
Awesome. And then we're going to do our last question is going to go to John. What adjustments, if any, do you take once snitch on pitch begins?
Yeah, so there are a lot. I think the biggest thing is that you have to do a lot less relying on your beaters in that situation, because typically the beaters are, if they're not physically protecting the snitch, they're at least distracted by the snitch. And so then you rely a lot more on your sort of physicality. You're going one-on-one against the other, or quaffle player on quaffle player against the other team's chasers. And so I think during those times, people are often driving, and I think making gang tackles on people that have their head down and are just barreling to the hoops is really important. And knowing when to step away from your hoops as a keeper is something that's very difficult, but will really like take you to the next level when you start making that decision effectively.
Awesome, fantastic. Okay, so we have to wrap it up because we still have a bunch of questions. So like I said, I'll be putting those in the Slack. I want to keep this conversation going. I want to keep all of the conversations of QuidCon going. So please engage there. I hope I we can see some more answers to the panelists. I'm going to put some of the ones that I still asked here in the Slack as well, because I've only called on 1 or 2 of our panelists. So if they have more thoughts to add, they can add them there. But thank you so much for joining us. I hope you all learned a little bit, laughed maybe a bit, had a good time. I know I did. But that's it. Thank you, and we'll see you later.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.